So terrific. We have many things to in our value proposition. I just want to focus on 5 key points. First of all, we're telecom and device pricing experts. So this is really our core expertise, and we've been doing that for more than 15 years. So that's really a differentiation. Second, we focus a lot on getting accurate and comprehensive data. And for that, we do a lot of control quality, insurance quality, and so on. So we know it's super important to have everything right. Third, our teams are a combination of telecom analysts, experts, and data scientists, programmers that helps us to provide the platform we're going to show a little bit after. Four, and very important, is our international experience. We're working on all continents except Antarctica, to be honest. And so we're used to work on very different type of marketing plans, of languages, and so on. And fifth, I mean, we can adapt a lot to your needs with customized data set, customized platform. What we're going to show is mostly based on an off-the-shelf platform, but nonetheless, we do adapt a lot of it for a specific customer and specific needs. In fact, talking about customers on the next slide, you can see we have a very long history and also a customer base with plenty of regulators and operators that we're used to work with. On the next slide, as the end of my introduction, so we still work for some of our customers with a traditional Excel approach with data collection, with custom report, custom database on Excel. It might be around basket-based methodology, as seen with the OECD, but it is often tailor-made approach. Nonetheless, we've introduced many new approach in the market. At the bottom of it, you can see PlanScout. PlanScout is an online price comparison engine made available to the public, and we're working even now on mobile apps for the same approach. So this is typically used by regulators that want to provide a trusted services in their country. Then what we're going to show that is being used intensively for the webinar preparation is our online version, online platform, in which you're going to find most of what you could find earlier in Excel, but better, and obviously with easier approach for time series, searching, comparing countries, and so on. You will be able to get more on that later, but the shortest and the best way to get an experience of it is our 50-second video we're going to show. It's no longer than that, and then we'll deep dive directly in the webinar. Thank you, Soichi, and we're hopefully available for questions along the way and at the end of the presentation.
Okay, it wasn't showing properly on my screen. It was kind of in the corner. I hope it wasn't the case for you.
Yeah, it was the same for me. But anyway, we're going to send everybody the slides and the link. So if you want to replay it, it's really just less than 1 minute.
Yeah.
Over to you.
Okay, so moving on to the main topic of today, talking about, so I'll start with part 1, where we actually find, although we're going to talk about premium pricing, there are some countries where we actually see all plans have 5G by default, so there is no distinction between 5G and non-5G plans. So I apologize straight away that this is a little bit kind of difficult to see, especially if you're on a laptop with a smaller screen. But those of you who follow our TDD monthly analysis piece, Certificates Data Dive, you may recognize this graph. I'm not going to talk about this graph in detail today because that's not the idea. But I did want to bring this up because of these 4 countries, which I've highlighted in red. So this, just to go over it quickly, this chart essentially is a box plot plotting all of the 5G plans on the left, and then all of the non-5G plans, that might be 4G, 4G plus, LTE, however you want to name it, those plans on the right for each country. And I hope you can see that the 4 boxes in red that I've put in there for Denmark, New Zealand, Spain, and the US, there are actually no 4G plans. At least that's the case for Denmark and New Zealand. And for Spain and the US, there is actually 1 plan in there. That said, that plan is very specific and it's not really aimed for general mass in the first place. So for the purpose of this webinar, we think it makes sense to class these 4 countries as essentially countries where all plans come with 5G by default anyway, and so there is no distinction between 5G and non-5G. Also, just a note, this is data from Q2. The following slides are data from Q3. I mention this because in Q3, we see now that Japan is also the same as these 4 countries. In other words, in fact, Japan underwent a big pricing structure change between Q2 and Q3. And as a result, now Japan sees basically no non-5G plans. So to summarize just this part quickly, the main message here is that out of the 16 countries we're looking at today, Denmark, New Zealand, Spain, the US, and Japan, we see that all plans come with 5G in the first place, and so there is no distinction between 5G and non-5G. So with that, some new findings. So as we're trying to look at premium value for 5G, what we've decided to do is first look at the cheapest 5G plan in each market and compare that with the non-5G plan with the same amount of data. So that was already a mouthful, but as I explain, go through the slides, I do believe and hope that it will become easier to understand what we've been doing in this webinar analysis. So quickly, just before diving in, a kind of a quick methodology explanation I'd like to put in here. So for those of you who are very familiar with looking at mobile prices and trying to compare, I'm sure you'll agree that comparing mobile plans is very much easier said than done. And essentially, it's very difficult to do because every plan is different. Okay, the price might be different, but then so is the amount of data included, the minutes, the SMS, and then further the speed, the value-added services, whether it includes roaming, international calls, zero-rated applications, etc. I could go on and on. And so this makes it very difficult to do an apples-to-apples comparison. Now, to tackle that is the second bullet point, where we kind of have an industry standard almost, if you like, where we use what we call a rational consumer methodology. And essentially what we do is we set a profile with certain requirements. So for example, we might create a profile where this person needs, say, 5 gigabytes of data a month and 100 minutes of calling and maybe even 0 SMS because this person only uses WhatsApp for his messages. And once we have that in place, what we do is then we look at all of the operators and the countries where the minimum requirement of that profile is met. So in this way, we can do an apples-to-apples comparison where we look for the plan which suits this profile for each operator in every market. So with that, moving on to the third bullet point, what we've done for this webinar is we first looked for the least expensive plan, which includes 5G for each of the market. Once we've done that, we've moved on to number 2, where then we look at the amount of data in that cheapest 5G plan, and then we look for the non-5G plan, which includes the same amount of data. So in that way, we're using the rational consumer methodology in a way to make an apples-to-apples comparison. So that's point 3. Again, this will become easier as I go on to the next slide as well. But then just a little kind of disclaimer at the bottom here. So when I'm talking about plans in general for this webinar, we have specifically focused on postpaid plans and standard plans. What I mean by standard plans is those which are aimed for the general market. So we exclude things like youth plans, senior plans, student plans, and also data plans, which are like tablet plans or plans specifically for your smartwatch, those kind of things. And all of that we can filter very easily through our Telecom Pricing Intelligence Platform, which Vincent explained to you earlier. And so all of the data is coming from our platform. So moving on. So the point one that I mentioned in the previous slide, I've taken 3 countries as a sample here. So what you can see is Belgium, Canada, France. And so taking Belgium at the top there, what this is telling us is that in Belgium, the cheapest plan, which includes 5G, costs €12 per month and includes 4 gigabytes of data, 150 minutes of AllNet, 150 AllNet minutes, and unlimited SMS. In France, for example, to get 5G, you have to pay a little bit more. So the cheapest 5G plan is $12.99 per month, but you do get more data. You get 20 gigs of data with unlimited minutes and SMS. So now we have that. What we've done is we've taken those plans, looked at the amount of data, and then looked at the non-5G, so essentially 4G, LTE, etc. plan with the same amount of data. So for this, I think France is the easiest to kind of understand at the very bottom there. So if you could look at that, we see here for France, we have, again, for 5G plan, 20 gigs, $12.99. If you're not looking for 5G, you can get the same 20 gig data for $9.99. So essentially, in the case of France, if you pay a €3 premium, you can get 5G for the same conditions for the other things like data, minutes, and SMS. So we did this for all the 11 countries, 16 minus 5, which I mentioned earlier, and we've grouped them into 4 different categories, which are the following slides. So group 1 is the kind of the most easy to understand. So I've already kind of explained it to you, the France case, if you like. And also, as you can see, the little flags there, we've also categorized Australia, Ireland, and Poland within this category. But I've also taken a screenshot on the right, as you can see. So this is basically the offer from Red by SFR. And as you can see, it's $9.99 per month for the conditions chosen here. But essentially, at the top, you can see internet. So essentially, you choose the amount of data you want, and then the speed, the vitesse. You choose either 4G or 5G. And then you choose if you want any international elements at the bottom. And then at the very bottom, it says calls and SMS are unlimited. And this is very easy to understand because basically, as you can see in the red box, the red dotted box, which I've written there, for €3 extra per month, you can get 5G. And everything else remains the same. So as I've written on the top left there, essentially for France, you pay a 30% premium or €3 premium per month. Everything else remains the same, and you get 5G. So to conclude this grouping number 1, we found 4 countries which fall into this category, and the premium price that you pay does differ quite a lot depending on the country. So we found it to range from, in absolute value, €3 to €842, which changed into percentage terms becomes between 20% and 83%. So depending on the country, we do see that 5G does have quite a high premium value, whereas in others, not so much. The second group is a kind of even higher 5G premium. So we've taken Canada here as an example for this group. So looking at the table there, we see that again, for the actual price, we see that the 5G premium is about 50%. So essentially, to receive 5G compared to non-5G, you have to pay double the price. But then, whereas group 1 was you had the same data, in this group, you actually get less data. We actually found no plan way to get exactly the same data, but you could get basically less data. So put differently, to get 5G compared to non-5G, you have to pay 50% extra, and then you don't get as much data. So if you want the same amount of data, you actually have to pay even more. You actually essentially almost have to pay like an extra data premium. So this grouping we could put in as Canada, Italy, and the Netherlands, and as a kind of high 5G premium value countries where you have to pay extra for both data and to get the 5G technology from your plan. The third group, it starts to get a look. So we start to kind of include the promotions for groups 3 and 4. But to start with group 3, this is a case where, again, so we've taken Germany here. So here we see that the price premium is 50% to go from non-5G to 5G. And then the data is actually on promotion here. So if we look at the data before promotion, we see that you pay a price premium to go to 5G, but within that, you essentially get also more data. So you're kind of paying for extra 5G speeds, but also more data at the same time. That said, once you apply the promotion where you get the double data, essentially the amount of data becomes the same, or in this case, you get 1 GB more with the promotion. So it becomes very much like the first group, the group with France, where essentially you're paying a 50% 5G premium to receive 5G, and everything else remains approximately the same. So this is group 3, where depending on the promotion, you see the amount of the 5G premium slightly change. And then the fourth group, this is a very interesting group, is actually where it's cheaper. You can actually get 5G for nothing or even cheaper. We actually found 3 countries which fall into this category. So Belgium, Estonia, and the UK. And so I've taken, as you can see, Belgium as the example here. And so actually, before taking promotions into account, we actually find that you can get a 5G plan. In this case, by the way, it's Orange Belgium, but you can get it from Orange. And then if you actually don't need 5G, you still have to pay 12 euros anyway, whether it's from a different operator or not. So this is the case where essentially it's interesting to see that due to competition dynamics within these countries, we're actually seeing cases where you actually don't have to pay any extra at all to get 5G. So, conscious of time, I realize I'm going quite quickly, but I hope this summary slide kind of, encapsulates all of the messages that I want to pass across today, and leave some time for Q&A at the end, hopefully. But so yes, essentially this is the summary slide, and as you can see, I've kind of tried to put in a little chart where we have on the y-axis, the top half is you pay more to get 5G, and the bottom half you pay less to get 5G. And then on the horizontal x-axis, we have you either get more data, when you pay more, you get the same, or you actually get less. So in this chart, the more towards the top right you go, 5G is treated as a premium. So just looking at group 2, for example, so this is the group which had Canada. So essentially we see, again, just as a recap, you're essentially paying a price premium of roughly 50–60%, but then that only gives you half or 3/4 of the data compared to non-5G. So essentially, you have to pay even more if you want to have the same amount of data as non-5G. What we found across the top half of this table, where you pay a premium for 5G, roughly speaking, yes, there are outliers such as 20% and 83%, but overall, the price premium roughly aligns at about 50–60%. The other point I wanted to mention was not forgetting the 5 countries I mentioned right at the beginning. So we have countries like Denmark, Japan, New Zealand, Spain, and the US, where there is no differentiation in the first place. All plans come with 5G by default, and is not used as any kind of differentiator within that market. Yeah, so that covers it from my end. I hope I've not gone too quickly, but as Vincent mentioned, you'll be receiving the slides afterwards. And so I think I've managed to leave some time for Q&A.
Yeah, there is a first question from Susanna. Well, there is a first series of questions, which is, about, really what would motivate a rational user to pay more for the same or more for less. There's still a difference between 5G and non-5G, but I'll let you address that. Soichi.
Yes, hang on, let me just digest the question.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, well, thank you, Susanna, for the question or the questions. So yes, perhaps first the question on yes. So I think Canada, and also I think your question on Canada, even more important is the group 4, essentially where you actually don't even have to pay more for Canada. So the first thing I'd like to mention here is a lot of it kind of depends on the competition dynamics within that country. So for example, going back to Belgium, what we actually see is in a lot of cases, like group 4, the MNOs who offer 5G are very aggressive, and they offer 5G from a very low basket. So you might remember, so for Belgium, you can actually get 5G for 4 gigabytes, a plan with 4 gigabytes, whereas in France, for example, you have to go all the way up to 20 gigabytes to get 5G in the first place. So what that does in turn is kind of makes it more difficult for the MVNOs, particularly the no-frills type players, to actually get any advantage over the MNOs. And so in Belgium, again, for example, what we actually see is we then have the MVNOs offer plans for 2 gigabytes or even like half a gigabyte, 500 megs, that kind of thing. And so that's where they're trying to position themselves on one side. And then we also have on the other side where they're trying to essentially provide, okay, they don't provide 5G, but they provide the same amount of data, but for much cheaper. So essentially it comes down to what the player needs, also what the subscriber needs, and the operators, depending on their strengths, whether they have 5G or not, or whether they're positioning themselves as a no-frills, low cost, they will adapt their pricing accordingly. Or at least that's how we see the markets, especially in the types of group 4. Does that answer? I hope that answers at least part of your question. Is there a second half to the question, I think?
Yeah, don't hesitate in the meantime if you have questions to put them in the chat.
As their soft 5Gs are compared to non-5G. Yeah, so I mean, this is kind of the $1 million question, I think. And, I've been around for a long time and been to various conferences, and the talk is always, what's the killer app for 5G? I think, and the answer is always fuzzy. And I think AR, VR, and gaming, online gaming, these were supposed to be, the real killer apps of 5G. And I think, to be fair, it has, depending on countries, like in Japan, where I saw myself, or like South Korea, where they've really gone into virtual, the metaverse. This becomes a topic in itself. I don't want to go too far into it. But when you really see, especially cultures where on the mobile phone, you really go into the metaverse, the virtual worlds, and you play games within there, the fast 5G speeds are very important. That said, on the other side, where that's not so popular in, for example, Europe, we also see, like polls where some people don't even know what 5G is. I mean, we mustn't forget that because we're in this industry, 5G is obvious, but for the average Joe, for my mother, for example, she doesn't really know what 5G is. She doesn't even know if she's subscribed to 5G or not. And so I think, for those kind of people, it's just a natural upgrade. They're not really interested in what kind of technology they're using.
Other questions? So I will ask one in the meantime, in case there is another question. So we see the premium potentially disappearing, at least in some cases. There's already disappeared for the countries that are on the right on the chart. So meaning there's no real 4G, 5G plan. There's there's just 5G. Can we expect still, I mean, other entries for differentiation like 5G SA? Is it something we believe consumers can understand?
Yes, thanks, Vincent. Yeah, Vincent, it's a very good question. Yes, I mean, I think there's a certain inevitability that more and more, as the more, as people become more accustomed to faster speeds, and even if you're not really interested in the differentiation between 4G and 5G, people just expect faster speeds. People are going to use more video, etc., and the differentiation aspect will become weaker and become less. And I think you mentioned a very interesting point that perhaps the next step for differentiation is going to be 5G SA. So 5G SA, just a quick recap, that's standalone. So essentially that's basically, let's just say even better 5G, let's say, just to keep things simple. And it's interesting you mentioned that because I don't want to talk too much about my country, but I know it, so I'm going to talk about it. But in Japan, all three of the MNOs, so apart from Rakuten, they actually offer 5G SA as a service, as a paid service. Now, I put that in inverted commas because Docomo was the first who launched 5G SA as a paid service in August last year, but is on promotion and it's free and has been free ever since its launch. So obviously, I think Docomo sees, wants to monetize it. They want 5G SA to be a differentiator, which allows more revenue. But the reality, at least so far, the fact that they've kept it at zero for more than a year now, kind of shows that the consumers are not ready to pay extra for this service for this standalone 5G SA. And also, I think we've seen more and more launches, like in Germany, in Spain. I think it was in Spain and in Germany too, the UK, in Europe. We are seeing more announcements that 5G SA is being made, but certainly these countries, it's just being offered by default. It's a case of if you have a compatible phone by chance, then you're going to get it already. You don't have to do anything in particular, is the main approach. So yes, we're kind of seeing a kind of transition phase where there's kind of some excitement about even better 5G in 5G SA, but I think we're still very far away from actually consumers understanding that and the advantages. We could talk about business, but
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Soichi, but we have more questions now.
Oh, that's good.
So we have two more questions in the chat. Maybe as I think people don't see the questions, but these ones are short, so maybe you can read them and loud and try to answer, even though it's not going to be so easy to answer today.
Okay, so first question, thank you to Anonymous Lindy. So beyond 5G access, how are MNOs differentiating their plans and how does that differ across the groups? Excellent question, thank you. So again, this is kind of one of those million-dollar questions, but I think the reality is the MNOs are finding it more and more difficult to differentiate their plans across the different groups. So this is something I wanted to keep this webinar relatively simple, so I didn't go into details, but for example, in Poland, we see some of the MNOs offer zero-rated apps. Now, this is a very thorny subject, I know, because, for example, in Germany, basically, so the regulator basically said that no, that's against net neutrality rules, and therefore you're not allowed to do it anymore. And so Deutsche Telekom, for example, T-Mobile, who had a lot of zero-rated apps in their higher-end plans, they had to kind of basically stop all of that. So yes, I mean, this is something, zero-rated apps, for example, is something, a thorny subject, but something which I think is interesting and something which our data picks up, but unfortunately we haven't really had the time to answer today. But I'd be happy to talk about it more. So yeah, please do get in touch if you're interested in that. I'm going a bit quickly because I know we're pushed for time as well. So next one from Nico. Thank you, Nico. What trends did you notice in premiums in 5G FWA, fixed wireless access? And do you think this will overtake traditional FTTP once the premium disappears? Okay, thank you for that question. The kind of short answer to that, I think, is it really depends on the country. because there are countries where I'm not an expert on the US market, but I think in the US, for example, FWA is very popular simply because there's a lot of places which are underconnected, and essentially the only real viable solution is FWA. Whereas there are other places, countries where FWA is not so important in the sense that most of the population can be connected without the technology. So in that sense, and I know this is a very cliche answer, so it depends on the country and the culture. And the other thing I would say is I don't think it's really a case of one overtaking the other. I do think it's a kind of a coexisting technology, and it really, again, it kind of comes back to it depends on the situation. But I think even taking away the kind of the premium value or not, I think FWA is more of like a solution, which is very important to make sure that there are no areas which are underconnected, and also for people who need a quick connection without having to go through all of the costly the works, all the work involved, both from the operator's perspective and the subscriber perspective.
So thank you, Soichi. I think we're already beyond time, so I think we're going to stop here. Thanks everybody for joining. We would like to mention that obviously you can just a glimpse of what we can do at the country level, but the same analysis can be done at the operator level, so operator by operator. And probably, I mean, we've said that each country is in that group, but in fact we've taken the cheapest plan from the cheapest operator, so it might be different from an operator to another, and it might not be in the same group, even though due to competition dynamics we can expect some alignment at some point. So if you want to know a little bit more for us, I mean, we organize demos, we organize a trial account in which you can play a little bit with the data and see what's in our main platform. So our main platform is 18 countries and soon expanding to more than 30, as we're going to include now also Central and Latin American countries. And we have tools to help you like almost automate everything you've seen here with basket and profile selection tools, in which you can build very rapidly your own basket and find that information operator by operator, seeing in there after that all of the details of the plans and so on. So looking at, is there anything else that is used for differentiating, or is it just 5G and the price premium? We hope to see you in further webinars that we're going to try to organize along the way. Also, you can find some of the information in our insights. So it's now a monthly to not overwhelm you. In the format. So please get in touch with us anywhere. I'll write rapidly to everybody with the webinar and the slides. So thank you very much, and thank you, Soichi.
I think we'll send a little survey as well at the end. So if you could answer that, that would be very much appreciated too.
Thank you, and
thank you very much. Have a good day. Thank you.